It's below that at 386 million. So I'll take the report as read, and if there's any questions, welcome any questions now.
Thanks, Renil. Any questions from any councillors? All right, you want to move on now to do you want to move on now to the second part, the rates and debtors?
Well, effectively, the rates and debtors will take as read. John will be here later in the session and talk about any specific questions on rates at that point in time.
Okay. Well, I'll move that the report be received. Do I have a seconder, please? Yep. Thank you, Worship. Okay, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, move on to item 9, which is the PMO report, key project report. And I'll take this report as read. Do you want to speak to that, to the report, Blair?
Yes, thank you. I'm just waiting for Carol Serra to come down. We've gone past, I thought, but the general managers are here to respond to any questions on the particular key project reports which are appended to this. In addition to the report, two things have been added. One is just a summary of the activities of the Portfolio Management Office. So you've got a sense in paragraph 17 of the sort of activities that Carol and her staff member do. And secondly, in section 24, the risks, we're just giving an update as to the matters from the internal audit report from PricewaterhouseCoopers that pertain to project management and the various activities that Carol is undertaking there to mitigate those particular risks. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for the detail of the update on the PwC internal audit. That's good to have that. Thank you. Any discussion, any questions from any councillors?
Blair, on page 34, under key issues, which is paragraph 17, about the fourth one down is phased closure, district plan review, phase 7, and assistance with the development of phase closure report. Is that the process we're currently going, is that what we're doing now? And I think I'm allowed to talk about this. There's a whole lot of submissions to our district plan. We're deciding whether to support or not. That's what you mean by phase 7?
Yes, I believe it is. And obviously Carol's just assisting them for project management expertise. Obviously, General Manager Brian Crowe's team is leading that work, but Carol's advice is more from a project management perspective to make sure that the project, the district plan review project, has been governed and managed in terms of good project management principles. So Brian may be able to speak to the specifics, but she's coming at it more from project management principles and disciplines to ensure that it's a complex project, that they follow through the appropriate closures as they work through various stages, they do project close reports and they move into the next stage. So.
Brian, I wonder if you could tell us how many phases are there expected to be, or do we just put a phase on when it needs to be put on?
Is that on? Yeah. So probably the one we're in just starting now, phase 8, will be the last one. And the phase 8 is to work through resolving all the appeals to the district plan. So that's the last one in this process.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have any, given that Carol's not here, has anyone any questions that they wanted specifically to ask Carol, or are you happy that we move on and move that the report be received?
You're going to buy some time, aren't you?
All right, well, let's...
I'll move.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do I have a seconder, please, that the report be received? Thank you, Karina. Those in favour, please say aye. Against?
Thank you.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 10 is the Ring Road update. Thanks, Tal. Chris? I'll take the report as read and invite Tal and Chris to present any further information that they wish to in respect to the report.
Catching up, you are going very quick. Yes, so, yep, councillors, take the report as read. The only issue I'd like to highlight is the emerging issue is the form and function of the intersection with Cobham Drive. So councillors recall some time ago they approved the macro scope or the high-level concept for the intersection of signals. As we've progressed the design, it's emerging that the pedestrian phasing might alter the performance of the intersection, which might require an overbridge rather than a at-grade phase on the signals. So that brings back into contention the possibility of a roundabout which has got a little bit better performance with a bridge as well. So we're working through that at the moment. We propose to be ready by the next strategy and policy, subject to the Chair's agreement, to bring back the macroscope change if required, if we want to move away from the signals. And prior to that, probably organising a little bit of an information session with NZTA there to look at the whole suite of projects along that length, which would be the Cobham Drive intersection, the Burger King roundabout and the Cambridge Road intersection. So I think if councillors can bear with us for one more month to the next meeting, we'd like to bring that forward just with a bit more clarity on that whole stretch of road. Apart from that, though, the Ring Road project is...
Can I ask questions on that aspect?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I'll wait for Chris to finish. And
Yeah, I'd finish now.
yep, Councillor McPherson.
I suppose you could say waiting for one more month isn't much in the scheme of things, since some of those roundabouts you've just mentioned up there, like the Burger King one, we've been waiting for a good 10 years and still had no progress on them. So it's a bit of a concern that nothing has sort of really been sorted out for access along that corridor and across that corridor in terms of all the problem areas that you engineers have identified over the years. We've had any number of proposed solutions come to us. I'm just not confident that that in a month's time we're going to end the arguments and it's all going to be sorted out. So I'd like some comments on that. Specifically about the intersection of Wairere Drive and Cobham, though. Last time, this meeting, or I'm not sure it was this committee or one of the committees, sorry, you engineers sold us the idea that it was safer and better to have a signalised intersection. So I'm puzzled as to what's changed in the last 2 months, unless it's NZTA saying we'll only fund roundabouts, and I'd like to know if it's the push from them, because we've had some problems in the past. You'll recall when you used to work as the regional manager for NZTA, that NZTA proposed the roundabout at the other Burger King to the north was proposed by NZTA for a 3-lane roundabout, and it took some vociferous protest from our council to change that to what works pretty well now as a signalised intersection. I can't see why the same sort of thing is a problem over that side, especially when you look at the issues we've had getting people across Cobham Drive to the gardens, and that being proposed as one part of the solution. You know, with signals, people can get safely cross. I can't imagine that a bridge, pedestrian footbridge, is going to be a cheap option, and that's been identified as being too expensive for either the city or NZTA in the past to fund. So I'm just not sure where what started this sudden re-look at things, Chris. And I note and hear you say that provided there's a bridge, it could be a safer option for pedestrians. But what about cyclists? Roundabouts are not safe for cyclists. How are they being considered in this whole thing? So I just, where I'm coming from, Mr. Chair, and asking for some comments on Chris, we had what seemed like an optimum solution proposed to us by our staff, by our management before, and now they're resiling from that, it seems.
So where do I start?
10 years ago.
So, look, I think that would be the intent of the information day prior to strategy and policy, to talk about some of those things. But just some general comments, like every intersection is different. I don't think there's one size fits all. So you've got to look at all the different things that are going on at an intersection and whether signals and roundabouts are the best. Roundabouts definitely do have a place, and we've got lots of them in Hamilton and they work really well. I think from a safety perspective, and once again a general comment, roundabouts are actually safer because the traffic speeds through roundabouts are very slow. Signals tend to be high-speed crashes when there are crashes, and the severity is quite high. So in one sense, roundabouts are safer than signalised intersections. I do take your comment about cyclists and the difficulty with cyclists and pedestrians at roundabouts. That is why any solution we've looked at for Cobham Drive in particular has to deal with the active modes, which is pedestrians in particular, and getting them across. So if it was a roundabout solution, it would have to have a grade separation option that's either under or over. I think the social issues with an underpass in that area I think would be quite significant, and the overpass would be a better option. Some of the geography or topography of the area lends itself a little bit to an overpass as well, and in terms of its not much height on the northern side and a bit higher on the southern side, landing in the gardens. So the underpass, I would imagine, would be able to be used by cyclists in terms of ramps. So there might be some stair options, but you have to have ramps for disabled access. So it would be cyclists. Talking to Tao, if it's a 3 metre ramp, it could be a shared on the ramp. So we're looking at that. We haven't got the detail of that. So your question is what's changed? I think in the way that these projects go, it's the first stage is to get macro scope approval, and so macro scope approval is a high level concept that still needs to be proved, and that's what we came to council last time and said, look, at the macro level we think signalise is the right option, but there then follows a lot of design and safety auditing and traffic modelling, and look, that's just highlighting that the traffic signals will have some limitations, particularly if we're trying to put the pedestrian phases in, and those limitations will be on efficiency and peak times. So what we're trying to get here is the right balance for the intersection. I'd rather slow down by this month to look at it to get the right intersection that's going to manage traffic well, but also deal with the active modes moving across Cobham Drive. So look, I think that's my general answer to all of those questions.
Could I ask then, this one follow-up and one part you didn't answer. The part you didn't answer was the whole strip that you're now looking at, and when are we going to get an answer on not just the intersection you referred to now, but those other ones you referred to earlier? And then the other one to do with the traffic modelling, I just want to know whether it was the same traffic model that led to a roundabout out in front of the base that had to be pulled out and replaced within 2 years by a signalised intersection at big expense to the ratepayers.
So no is the answer to that question. And the route, yeah, the whole route. Look, there is a lot of work going on under the banner of one network to look at the whole route there and the 3 intersections and how they work together. So that is the work that would bring forward to the next committee meeting. Look, those 2 intersections are NZTA intersections, as you know, and the timing of those is in their hands. All we can do is encourage them to keep them in the program for funding and to fund them as quickly as possible. So all indications are that they are looking to do that in general conjunction with our connection to Cobham Drive. I think they're emerging perhaps on a signalised one at Cambridge Road intersection and the roundabout option that's been to this council before on a number of occasions for the Burger King roundabout. But that is part of the modelling, is just testing all 3 intersections in conjunction and how they'll work together. Look, there is already a large roundabout at Garden Entrance, as you know, in Galloway. So that's one of the thoughts of NZTA in terms of a roundabout for this intersection, because they're so close together to have the same form of intersection together. But they completely understand and are supportive of the grade separation, the need to get pedestrians across the road safely.
I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if we could, rather than, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of stuff, information coming back to us, whether we shouldn't be going back to a workshop before it sort of comes to a final committee.
Can I just say I agree on that? I thought I tried to articulate that prior to coming to SMP. I'd try and organise an info day or a workshop where we can have NZTA here with the routes and the intersections and explain to councillors in that informal setting of what would be coming forward to the strategy and policy.
You say an info day, I was talking about something where there'd be consultation, not just us receiving information.
Yeah,
Does
but
NZTA do that, or do they just tell us?
Yeah, no, they certainly do, as you know, councillor. So that's the intent of the info day, is to come and starts with NZTA and us telling you what we think the answers are, and you will always have a view that would help form the right answer.
Thank you.
Sounds to be the sensible outcome, doesn't it, to actually have NZTA involved, given their responsibilities at Burger King and how they see the whole of those three intersections connecting.
Yeah, look,
rather than doing a short-term fix, which then needs to be replaced in a couple of years' time.
Correct.
Yep. Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, I think having an open workshop is really important. This is the final linchpin in a 30-year project, and so obviously it's the traffic management of that intersection, but equally important, I want to look at the strategic linking of the East Town Belt, or that area, through to the Hamilton Gardens, both from the point of view of cyclists and pedestrians. So at that workshop I'd want the relevant people from the Parks and Gardens and the Hamilton Gardens, because there's a couple of things to be achieved here, and I certainly would hope that there's a very robust, if it's going the roundabout way, there's a robust present obviously around that, and why a traffic intersection lights wouldn't be the thing, and then obviously forecasting future traffic movements and traffic density once of course the Eastern Expressway is completed, and also bearing in mind that, and albeit this may be 10 or 15 years away, even longer, we are looking at beyond the current intersection, the bridge crossing to the Peacock's growth cell. So it seems to me we want to do some long-term discussion so that this process is adequately future-proofed. And while I understand that Transit in this case has the final, NZTA basically have the final say, is that correct? Because we're dealing with state highway. One would assume that there would be a spirit of agreement with this council.
Yep, look, that is the case. Just to give you assurance, either option, I think, will deal with the issues that you're raising, councillor. So NZTA is working with us on an agreed solution. We've come to council before and said this intersection treatment at best is an interim treatment until the Southern Links comes in, and it'll be designed for a 10 to 15-year sort of life, in which case the Southern Links connection will take over. So we've already talked to council about that, so nothing's changed there. So it is integrated with the Southern Links and the Gardens proposals.
Given, just quickly, given the significance of this final bit of a 30-year project, given the fact that my message to NZTA respectfully is, when we pointed out Boundary, not a good idea to link Boundary Road to the expressway. Sometimes common sense does evolve around elected members, and one of the reasons that you have this 30-year ring road project was because of the extreme common sense, not of engineers who wanted to take a highway right through Galloway Street with respect to them then, but common sense of ordinary residents and people and councillors. So I'm looking forward as an elected member to actually get into a little bit of the micro detail and just test all of those options, because we do really have to get this one right, and dare I say, it gives us a great opportunity to link and have some appropriate pedestrian linkage across that dual carriageway into the gardens.
Thank you.
So,
Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, I think I fully agree with Councillor McPherson here. From what I can remember, the access to the gardens has been a continuing issue for the last 30 years that I can recall of. I think it's very important we get this right, because when you look at what happened at the base there, where we put in 3 roundabouts, one outside the base entrance, one at the Burger King roundabout, and the other was at Te Rapa and Wairere. And then, of course, we pulled those out and put traffic lights in. I think what we have to realise, if we're looking for safety, we probably go for a roundabout. If we're looking for efficiency, we're probably going to go for traffic lights. And don't forget, of course, by 2019, all these roads are going to become local roads.
Yes.
They're not going to be NZTA's roads, and they're going to be left with us for the rest of our days. So I think really, and the other problem we've got, of course, here in Hamilton, we've got 150 traffic experts on what should be done.
This is
153,000.
this is obviously the reason
Yeah.
why we could have a,
We all want
we
to be
could have a
involved.
planning day or a
Sure.
planning
12
session.
of them around this table.
Best thing.
But Councillor O'Leary, do you
I
have
agree.
a question?
I just wanted to just clarify, Chris, if it says in here on point 28 around the possibility of the overhead pedestrian bridge, if they go to a roundabout, so on that day, can you just, if that's going to be the recommendation from them, I would be interested in seeing what that actually looks like and how that works, and
Yep.
because it's probably quite some time. Actually, I don't know if we have any in the city.
Overhead bridges?
Yeah.
Probably not.
No, so, and
There's
given
one,
its
there's one over
location.
there's one over Wairere Drive, isn't
Yeah,
there?
that's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but given its location
Goes
into
over
the city
top
and close to the gardens, I'd be really interested in what they
Or
would
over,
be
over
proposing.
one of the
That would be
ways
the-
anyway.
So,
Okay.
Councillor, can I just make one correction to Councillor Tooman there? He said in 2019, this road will be ours. So just to be clear from councils, our advocacy as a staff level is that the roads would come to us when they complete Southern Links, which will be a lot later. So I don't have an expectation that when they complete the Waikato Expressway that they will hand State Highway 1 to us. I think from council's perspective, when they complete Southern Links would be the appropriate time to hand the State Highway back to us. So that's just quite an important issue, I think, in terms of that whole responsibility for that highway.
Any further questions on this report, on the Ring Road update?
So,
So-
Mr. Chair, can I just say, apart from this issue, look, the project is going extremely well. Some of the observations we're making on the traffic diversion off the local road system onto this is quite stunning. So the project is working really well. The comments that you'd see are generally very favourable about it. The walking and cycling provisions are being well received. So the project, don't take this one issue as a downer on the project. It's a very good project and it's working really well. It's on budget. This might put a little bit of a delay into it just while we resolve this issue in the final end, and we've signalled that in the timing of this report.
Could we have this planning session before the next strategy and planning?
That's our
Which-
intent, yes.
Which is, of course, where this decision needs to lie, isn't it, is with the S&P committee?
It's our intent to try and work with democracy to schedule that in our busy timetables.
Thank you.
I'll move the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gallagher. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
Mr Chair, I'm just, I know you've set the agenda, but I'm wondering, I note that we have under item 17, the community occupancy application. We do appear to have representatives from the Girl Guides Association. It seems to me we surely could pick that one up now. I'm wondering, unless there's some other staff members who need to come and join us for that.
Well, can we do the next one, which also involves Tao and Chris, and we'll have a look at whether we move that item.
I'll move that report, item 11.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's item 11, recommendations from management. Seconder, thank you, Councillor King. Question?
Just a question, Chris. Key background, point number 7, and this is one of these sort of Department of Fantasy word things. I just want to get some clarity what it means. Council adopted a quote-unquote best for river approach to the consent process and committed to a time, blah, blah, blah. What's best of river? And I'll contrast that with best for people who want to drink water out of it, best for or yeah, best for the city, best for river? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the consent process at that time was quite significant in terms of the compliance issues for the river. We've been operating on quite historical consents, and we were dealing with quite significant upgrades to improve our performance in terms of the water quality going back to the river. So that was the approach taken at that time, was what is best for the river in terms of the health of the river, in terms of the nitrogen levels, the phosphorus levels, and some of the stuff from our treatment process that we put back into the river.
Okay, so if you pick that as your objective, what are the other things you've had to compromise to do that? I mean, I'll give you some, like it may have cost more than it would have if we did something else, may mean that we are more at risk of dry weather events, and consequently, because that just sounds lovely, best of river, sounds really neat. But just what does it mean in terms of concrete things for people in the city? Because we've gone for a best of river approach, you can't canoe on the river or something, or I don't know.
Yeah, look, it predated my time in council, but you're right, it would have been a balance of all of those things at the time. Increasing compliance is cost. So I know that those were the debates going on through the whole consent process, which was a very, very vigorous and long drawn-out consent process in terms of balancing the cost of compliance with the compliance standards. So that was a big debate. Obviously, with us trying to be responsible managers of a treatment plant, but trying to be realistic for two things. One is our achievability of the consent conditions, and two is the cost of treatment to comply with those consent conditions. So I think it's fair to say we've landed in a space that's is still challenging. Some of our consent conditions are very challenging, and we're generally compliant, unless we have a few issues which have been before this council, but generally we're complying. But it is a tough business. I think what we want to keep out for is any more lifts in the compliance and our ability for those two reasons, practical ability to meet increased compliance and the cost.
So I guess what is the process for you to kind of challenge any objectives or goals that are encompassed in a best of river system, where you think that it would be better for the city or the citizens or something else? How do you go about it? So that's locked into the consents, this best of river.
So that paragraph is pretty much historical.
Yeah.
So they're locked into long-term consents that we won in around that time to take us out to 2027, I think. So 2027 is the next time we go through our consenting process, where I expect once again there will be the same discussions about a lift in performance and standards and the costs and achievability. So that paragraph is pretty much historic in terms of...
Presumably best of river was distilled down into some concrete standards, and you started to talk about nitrogen and things like that.
Yep. It would be things like, meeting bathing water standards, and, nitrogen levels is the big one, and it's the big one for the farming sector as well. So nitrogen is a big issue for the river, and we've got to play our part and try and treat nitrogen to reduce our nitrogen input into the river. So,
are there any standards that you're forced to meet because of that, or because of anything that you think are
absolutely
extreme?
They are our consent conditions in terms.
No, sorry, but are any of them you think are ridiculous is too strong a word, but any that you think are
all very, very challenging.
And so would you tell us that, and then we could, if there's something that you can confirm that is costing a hell of a lot of money to do for no benefit, or is simply technically almost impossible to achieve, what's the process of challenging these things?
Probably you can't challenge them now. The process is probably in the consenting process, but look, they're all achievable, and we're achieving them. So we've generally got a good plant. We're generally in very good compliance with our conditions. So what we want to keep an eye on, though, is the developing view on, the river and the healthy river, and perhaps increases to those standards. We think our standards are already at a very, very high level and higher than a lot of other potential polluters of the river. So it's just, to answer your question, is just continued engagement in all the processes. And look, a big consent process like this would find its way through council, but it's going to be in 2027, or any other planning processes or changes that happen in the meantime that might come from Healthy River.
And the consenting authority is the regional council.
Correct.
What's the river authority then?
The river
Is that
authority,
advisory to the...
it sits alongside regional council, but it's just got a broad mandate to look at the health of the river.
Okay, further questions? Okay, we have a motion, recommendation for management, which has been moved and seconded. Could I call those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Okay, if it's the wish of the meeting, I'm happy to consent to Councillor Gallagher's wish to consider now item 17, given that we have some members of the Girl Guides Association and we have our supporting staff. So if you'd like to flick over to 105 and the report on the community occupancy application from the Girl Guides Association. So welcome Sally and welcome Renee.
Oh, thank you. If I can, through the chair, I'd like to take the report as read. I would just like you to consider the following points. Within the Girl Guides' previous lease, it did not include a right of renewal, and that's why we're here today putting forward their application for a new lease. Discussions had been had with the Girl Guides in around December regarding future lease term period of 5 or 10 years. However, since this time, the community occupancy policy and the Hamilton Gardens management plan review have been completed, so there has been different discussions since that time. The likelihood of the area of the gardens where the Girl Guides are located is being used as a formal garden area was stipulated during the development of the Hamilton Gardens management plan, and that has been endorsed by council. Within the report you will find that the annual payment is to increase from nil to $257.50 per annum, and this is based on their land area lease as the Girl Guides own their building. The term of the new lease is stipulated of 5 years, is identified within the Hamilton Gardens management plan, and council really does appreciate and value the contribution of the Girl Guides make to Hamilton community, helping girls and young women develop life and leadership skills. As within the report, their current members is 697, and this is supported by 118 volunteers. So Renee and myself are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, a question, Councillor
I'm just wondering, I noticed the presence of representative of the Girl Guides Association. Is there anything they wanted to add to that report or not?
Thank you for that question. Michelle Gooden from Girl Guides New Zealand. Really, we were just here to answer any questions that councillors may have in respect of our occupancy currently.
It'd be my intention to move the staff recommendation at the appropriate time.
I'll second.
Chair.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. The rental, the community occupancy rental calculation is based on the footprint of the building, not the whole area, which includes, from memory, quite a large car parking area, and it's a sort of gated, isn't it? The property has a gate, and yeah, so it's only the footprint of the building that's included in there. Yep. And the 697 members and the 118 volunteers are the people actually using that facility. Thank you.
Yes, and in addition to that, we do have other communities. That's just the guiding fraternity, the current Waikato volunteers and girls, but we do have other regions.
Yes. Yeah, I was aware of that. Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, so that actually brings rise to are the guides allowed to, I'm asking you probably, Sally, in the first place, are the guides allowed to charge other groups, or, I mean, we're charging them as though they're the sole occupiers and users, but they're not quite. it seems. It seems like more partly at least a community space.
So there is no subleasing proposed as part of this lease application, but they do share their facility with other groups.
So why are they being charged the whole lot? That's what I can't quite, I just can't it's more in relation to the policy. I can't understand how that's left to them being charged, but not someone else sharing the cost if others do use it.
Because if I can through the chair, the lease is actually with the Girl Guides, and that is their community contribution to having others use their facility to support them. Can I
So
discuss that?
if, as the chair says, there's a larger area that's available for the use and gated in that, in some other cases, organisations are being charged for whole areas, and some, in this one, for instance, just the footprint of the building. So I'm just wondering what the actual what definitions are being used, and are they different in different community body leases?
Yeah, so I guess a lease creates an exclusive use right, so the Girl Guides in this case have exclusive use of the footprint of their building, and so that's the leased area.
So other groups can come and go even though there's a gate?
In terms of the site on the Hamilton Gardens area, you can still walk through the site. It's about, I suppose, that we have a gate in terms of timeframes for when the Hamilton Gardens are open to stop people from coming in and doing antisocial behaviour as such. So that site, apart from their building, which is obviously the area of their lease, is their exclusive use site. You can still freely walk around that site if need to.
So the gates for our purposes, not theirs so much, yeah.
Well, it is to also protect movement of vehicles.
Yeah. So the other question I had originally actually was related to the 5 years of the lease. I can understand that our Hamilton Gardens management plan wants the right to use that area perhaps in future, but from the point of view of a community organisation, a voluntary sector community organisation, who may want to maintain or even upgrade their buildings, that's not a very long lease. What was the guide's view? I mean, you may want to answer this, sorry, would they have preferred a longer lease? And, you know, why could we not offer a 10-year lease? There's no immediate plans for using that for the gardens?
So, if Renee can answer that.
Yep, so the Girl Guides would prefer a long-term lease at the site because they do own their own building, and the submission to the Hamilton Gardens management plan related to that. But the Hamilton Gardens management plan specifically says that the Girl Guides lease will be renewed until 2019, so hence why we've recommended a 5-year period.
What was the rationale for
Because
that? I mean, have we got specific plans for using that area within 5 years? Or at the end of the...
So the specific plan is for a themed garden to be located here, but that is subject to funding of the Hamilton Gardens concept.
So there's no funding in the current 10-year plan, but it's being proposed for the one we're about to debate?
Correct.
Okay, so is it also being proposed that we're going to work with the guides to help them find another site to relocate their building perhaps, or their operations too?
So under...
So I'm just wondering why that's not written in there, because I understand the need for it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's also a community group. It's not easy for a community group to uplift, and how it should be written in there. I would have thought that we were going to help them find a suitable long-term site.
So within the lease itself, they will need to apply for a new lease within 12 months of the end of that period, and that's when we can look at in terms of whether or not funding has been successful for that garden to be developed. If it has been, then we can look at other options with them at that time. Otherwise, there could be other options for the use of the site if funding has not been gained to develop that garden.
I guess it's just putting all the onus on them and none of it on us, even though it's our changed usage of the area that's going to trigger, perhaps, them having to leave. Is there any reason why it's over to them or not to ask? you know, why can't we initiate that? I mean, doesn't it make sense, planning sense for us to say, okay, what's the best place long-term for the guides? Let's work with them over the next 3 years to find that.
Just in regards to the change of use, it's not actually a change of use, it's been indicated since the 70s, so in very early in very early management plans, it's always been an outline for future development, so there's been an understanding for some time that that area is a location of future development. Hence, there was no right of renewal after the 28 years, and at this stage, because there isn't a specific date for proposal of that, but it is planned sometime in the future, we've just put a 5-year lease in place with the 12-month leeway.
I understand all of that, but it seems to me that we've allowed them to continue, encouraged them to continue, allowed them to put in their building and presumably it's had more than one iteration of the building and things like that. So isn't it in the whole community's long-term good for us to be proactive, to find a place they're not going to wonder what's happening in 5 years' time?
And if I can talk to the changes through the Community Occupancy Policy Review, that is why we do 12-month reviews of their outcomes plan, and that's where part of that conversation can happen during that process. So I agree with you, that's something we need to be proactive on, and with the Community Outcomes Plan we can have those discussions with the Girl Guides at that time.
Okay, thanks.
Right, Councillor Mellon.
Just a bit of clarity on the 5 years. My understanding of a lease that they have, I think they call it the right to quiet enjoyment of the property. But I assume they're allowed to, if they want to, sublease it out to someone else and collect money or not collect money from them, subject to it being available for their usage, or are they unable to do that? Because I wasn't quite clear on what you said.
Yeah. So
Or what the lease says, not what you say.
Yeah, so in terms of the lease, any subleasee of a leased area needs to come through and be approved by council.
So subject to that, though, they can let it out to the Scouts or the Cubs or a Mahjong club and charge them, and which I don't have a problem with, so long as that's clear. So I think, yeah. Yep. Thank you. But we can, if it was something we deemed to be offensive or dangerous to the building or something like that, we could stop it.
That's right.
All right, so we have another question, Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, I would just request in our descriptive minutes, a minute note of the advice received from Sally that and Helen that our staff, that they would be intending to work with the Guide Association re long-term location issues, and it's the same principle that we might have, for example, with our wonderful cadets. Air Force cadets on the East Town belt. I think it's a similar issue. So I think if we could at least have a minute note, which obviously is noted by the association, because I certainly would expect, which I'm sure we'll have, is a proactive relationship. So if the point comes where the theme garden finds itself in that area, then obviously there's a transition process. And the other thing is that the sooner the Guide Association knows where the gardens are going, you know, in that area, the better. Now, for example, if it's pretty clear within a year or two that a theme garden is not coming there for 10 years, then logically that should surely, you know, give them a right to come back to us to negotiate, say, a 5+5.
I think, Councillor Gallagher, we have got evidence that, in fact, that staff do work with with this and with other groups to ensure that where it's possible, we will accommodate their wishes.
Yes, I want a minute note, and I won't go to another decision that we made last week in terms of another theatre group, but I will just leave that. But I think this is good. I think if I can now speak to the motion, if questions are finished.
I think, Councillor Mellon, did you have another question?
Well, if the motion has something, I'm just not supportive of what Martin just said then.
A minute note.
I know, but it puts an obligation on the council which is beyond what the lease is. And it's going to be, in 5 years' time, what assists people to find a new property means is going to be very, very difficult for someone to interpret. And I think we shouldn't do that, and I think it's unclear. We have a custom of helping, but the fact that you've picked this one out to put a note in the minutes may put an extra burden on a future council, which I think is unclear and is unfair, actually.
Well,
That's just my point.
all
I
I'm
don't
doing
know
is
if we're
I'm
in
merely
debate
putting to paper what we've,
Yeah.
with respect, what we've been advised by staff. This is a normal process where staff, as I understand it, are proactive and advising, assisting. That's all. I mean, in the end, it's not committing council to giving massive financial assistance if that moment comes. But one would always hope that, you know, we use our acumen and our resources in this building to help community groups in accordance with our social wellbeing strategy, which we still have, and our active Hamilton strategy, which we still have. And certainly all I'm looking for is, you know, the long-term relationship, so that if we know that something's going to happen in 5 or 10 years, we are talking to the guiding association earlier rather than later. There may, for example, be other plots of public land or other buildings that we own that could be considered, for example. That's all I'm saying. It's not obligating us, because you can't tell the future.
But I think we've got evidence of this in this case, that after 28 years, the guide's lease has expired with no right of renewal, and staff have been working with them in order to accommodate a renewal on the best terms and in the context of council and Girl Guide's needs. So we have the motion moved and seconded.
Yeah, and I just want to, I think all of us are very grateful in terms of our social wellbeing strategy, the wonderful work guides do. I declare a former interest in, I had a daughter who used to use this particular premise. Pass on to the volunteers, please, the wonderful work. But this is just a good example, yes, I'm biased, a good example of a group that just gets on with it to help our young people, and it's a good example where a council reserve is a bit of a council reserve is put to good use. And I'm sure I speak for all the colleagues to just commend the Guiding Association and what they do.
Thanks, Councillor King.
Yeah, just a couple of questions for the sake of the minutes. So we'll do our best in 5 years' time, but there's no guarantees.
Yes, we will do our best, but we obviously need to look at the portfolio in 5 years' time, so yes.
Thank you.
All right, so the motion is moved and seconded. Do I have those voting in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, ladies, for attending. Right, we'll move back now to item 12. Thank you. And item 12,
Colour TV, Sky Movies.
this is pipeline cleaning. Welcome, Chris. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you.
I'll take the report as read. Do you have anything further you wish to add?
I know from my perspective, this is hopefully a straightforward operational report, so happy to answer any questions.
I'll move.
Thank you, Your Worship. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Questions? All right, put to the vote. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 13 is the water treatment plant, additional health and safety measures, and Andrew is presenting with Chris. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Toomey.
Going back into history a little bit here, I attended quite a number of chlorine leaks at Kinleith many years ago, and we just got on with it. Looking at this here, is this here as an over-the-top, shall I say, requirement from health and safety? When you consider that in the manufacture of paper and all that sort of stuff, there was regular chlorine leaks and that sort of stuff, and we got on higher ground and let the stuff settle on lower ground and it was all over. But as to whether or not we can do this, and when I look at it, it's $1.7 million, is that correct? For this chlorine buffer, I think they call it. Scrubber, that's it. Seems to me to be a hell of a lot of money just to, on the off chance, and reading the report, there's very, very little chance of this happening. So, yeah, I'm just wondering about health and safety going over the top, really.
Yep, so a couple of comments on that, Councillor. Look, we're very clear in the report that the likelihood of a significant chlorine leak is very, very low. Look, we've got very good chlorine handling facilities on site that were put in place in the last plant upgrade. So the likelihood is very low. But I would disagree with your comment. Look, I worked at Kinleith and I might have got caught up in one of those at one stage actually, and I remember going home and got blistered from one thing. But I think it might be slightly different because, make no mistake, the significance of this event, if it eventuates, is very, very significant. So if it did eventuate and you had a large chlorine leak, the consequences are really significant. So it wouldn't be something that you could just say that would be okay. So, look, it is a really difficult decision. It's been a difficult decision for us as SLT. We took it to SLT and had a bit of a workshop on this one as well. And we just felt that on balance that we need to be able to provide the strongest possible assurance to our staff, foremost, and the community that we can manage a chlorine leak if we get one at this facility. So it is a difficult decision, but look, we clearly think this is the right decision.
Further questions in respect to the report?
Happy to remove the report. I'm happy to remove the recommendation.
Thank you, Worship.
Could I just,
Yeah.
just the funding of this thing, sorry. I can't see it. It's obviously a new item, isn't it?
What we're proposing, Councillor, is a reprioritisation of an existing project. So what we tried to find was a neutral impact on the budget. So there was a project in our 10-year plan called Alum Sludge Dewatering. So the priority of that project is not as high as this project. So the proposal in front of you is largely a reallocation of that funding, so there's a neutral impact on the budget. There's a slight chance that when we go through the design that it might exceed our ability to keep it neutral, but I think we believe that it's very likely that it will be a neutral impact on the budget. So it's a reprioritisation of an existing project.
And the alum sludge, I can't remember what the other verb was.
The alum sludge dewatering?
Yeah. That is, isn't required to be done.
It's not as high priority, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a high priority, quite a high priority at one point in time, but over the last couple of years we've taken our biosolids down to Tokoroa and vermicosting our biosolids. So the need...
What?
Sorry, let me start again. So we used to take our biosolids up to Hampton Downs and put it into the landfill. So some of the quality of our biosolids indicated that might not be a long-term option for us. But since that time, this council has entered into an arrangement with the forestry sector down at Tokoroa where we take our biosolids down there. They mix it with pulp and put worms into it, and all of the biosolids are then beneficially reused in the forestry to grow trees. So the priority is reduced a little bit.
Here's the link with Kinleith.
Good tour. Excellent visit. You should all go. Should all go and have a look at it.
It's very interesting.
Very interesting.
So the primary benefit associated with the alum sludge dewatering project doesn't presently exist. It may that change in the future as we go forward, but doesn't presently exist, and there's an opportunity to reprioritise it for this project now with that knowledge.
So in terms of your costing then, if you look at para 61 through to 65, there's a potential budget risk of it costing another $300,000 more than the other project would have cost, and that hasn't been budgeted for in the 10-year plan.
That's correct. So look, we'll be working really hard in scoping that to fit that budget. But at this point in time, with the knowledge we got, we just have to flag it might exceed our ability to keep it cost neutral by that amount.
All right, further questions? Otherwise, we have the motion moved and seconded, which is the recommendation from management, which is paragraph 11 or 10.11.
10.5.
10.A, on the top of page 92. So those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, I'm still here for that.
Stay seated.
It's like an infrastructure committee.
Okay, item number 14, which is the wastewater interceptors.
Yes, through you, Mr Chair, just take the report as read as well. It's a report that doesn't require any increase in budget. It's rather a reallocation of how we spend money in our business. And the request is for an increase in an approved contract, sum to a contract, which is one methodology that we adopt for relining interceptors. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you. Second, thank you. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 15, which is the Garden Place car park, replacement of access control equipment. Stay seated, Chris.
Stay seated.
Welcome,
It's the Chris show.
welcome, Phil.
Look, once again, through you, Mr Chair, I'll take the report as read. So this report does involve unbudgeted expenditure. We think at this point in time it's unavoidable expenditure. The proposal is to fund it from the debt buffer and put it on the risk and opportunity schedule and work hard through the year to bring in a balanced budget. But we think the work is essential now. I think the report articulates quite well some of the problems we're having with the equipment down there, and some of you would have experienced some of the problems which seem to be accelerating over the last 6 months.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Are you sure that if we spend 350 grand on that, that will up its value by at least 350 grand? That's one question.
Yeah. Can I call on Blair, because Blair's team have been more involved in that side of things for that?
Yes, thank you, to the Chair. It's more a case of if we do not spend the money, the value will be reduced by at least that amount of the car park equipment. So
that's fine, that either way round. Secondly, and this is a serious question, we used to have some staff members, or Wilson used to have some staff members down there. $350,000 would pay probably for a staff member to be based there to manually operate that thing for at least 7 years on current rates. I would have thought, maybe 6, depending on overtime. Have you considered, done a bit, check that out in the business case as well, whether it's worth that, going down that road? I mean, especially since we don't know yet whether we're actually selling it.
Yeah, look, I'd have to be honest and say we haven't looked at that as an option. I imagine the issues with the valuation would still remain in terms of the sale of the car park. It wouldn't fix the issue that the equipment is out of date and unfixable. But we hadn't looked at the proposition of, for an interim period, just manually accommodating the management of the car park.
Just if I can add, there may be some other things involved there. We have 2 entries. We'd have to keep 2 entries open to prevent queuing back on the main road. People pay by credit card and all sorts of other means. We'd have to have mechanisms for that. We may need to have 4 or 5 staff at peak times, at least 2 during the day. It may cost more than we thought.
It may do, but that's not what we did before, Phil. And I think we accepted credit cards back last time. There was staff down there, so presumably there's some machinery still around. I'm just wondering whether we're going for the gold-plated option on a asset that seems to be depreciating by the minute, certainly by the year, and whether there are more short-term, cost-effective ways of doing it.
Look, I think the long-term solution for the car park is proper, up-to-date and smart equipment in terms of access control. I think our eye has been on the the valuation and the sale of the car park, and that it would be reflected in some way or other. This cost would be reflected in the valuation. So we haven't looked at seriously that option for an interim period. We haven't looked at that.
Councillor O'Leary, then Councillor Wilson and Councillor
I've
Gallagher.
figured mine out, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you. I just want clarification. How many quotes have we received for the work?
I looked at Phil. I think that we have looked at and sought some views from a number of companies, but the approval today would just put us into a procurement process and a formal tendering process to get the best price. So this is not based on a tender we're waiting to let. We've certainly canvassed a number of companies. I understanding it's all overseas equipment. So it's free. I'll let Phil.
Three companies who are operating in New Zealand.
I just raised the fact that I recall in another role that Councillor Gallagher and I operate in, that we had 2 car parks and the quantum involved was considerably less than what's being suggested here for one. And if I recall, I think the local solution at the hospital was a local New Zealand firm. So could I just really, I don't support this and won't be supporting it, but could I encourage staff to really have a good look at the costings here? Because I have a horrible suspicion these companies see the Hamilton City Council coming from a mile away. And I just wonder if we can't sort of think outside of the square.
So if councillors approve this today, what they're approving is a budget for the replacement, and we can assure you that we would hunt down the optimum solution and the best market price.
Great. Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, I acknowledge that the other previous items went straight through and obviously is just as equally important. But this one, I mean, can we just also reflect on the people assistance? I mean, I declare a condition that hates car parking building. I hate them with a passion, so I'm trying to be objective on this one. But I hate the automated system where there's no real live person, particularly when someone's lost their money and they, there's a block up, and particularly when you're wanting to get out. So I'm just, in approving this, I'm just obviously wanting you to use your normal lateral approach on these things, picking up Councillor Wilson's point. And I'm just wondering what you're saying in summary, that if we don't do this, and that reduces the value of this building. Is that what you're really saying?
That's certainly one dimension to it. I think one dimension is the valuation of the car park will be affected
as
by
a going
this equipment.
concern.
The other one, important for Phil in particular, is the customer experience in that car park. It's pretty poor at the moment.
Right.
We're leaking revenue and upsetting customers. So that's one dimension.
People are getting trapped in it.
People are getting trapped in it
Yeah.
and lifting up
them out.
areas.
Can't get out.
Yeah. Yeah, but I make the point is that is there a real live person that comes and obviously helps? I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't use that building.
Yeah.
I don't.
So one of the things we've got is a real live person there trying to keep customers
Good.
happy
No, no,
and letting
sure.
them out at the moment as well.
Yeah.
But it's sort of out of hours, it gets quite difficult. Personally, I've been involved on a number of occasions of trying to calm down a queue of about 20 people trying to get out, and equally frustrated, and probably taking some unilateral action.
CBD competitive with our shopping mall. For the competitive, people want a good parking experience, obviously. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Further questions? Right, we have the recommendation from management.
Sorry, Councillor Pesco, I do have a question.
Yes, Your Worship.
So did, you said here that you're intending to put this on the risks and opportunities to look for the budget in the coming year to cover it. So this will be debt funded?
Capital would be debt funded, yes.
So what projects did you consider removing from the capital project list in order not to put it on the risks and opportunities list?
Um,
So a reprioritisation.
we We haven't specifically looked at that. I guess council could decide to forego some of the discretionary transport projects if it wanted to try and offset that. I think we'll probably be, part way through with a number of commitments against some of those projects, but council could choose to slow down that program if they wanted to reduce the impact of this particular project. Apart from those, I don't think there are any specific projects within the transportation and water areas.
Yeah, but you haven't considered which ones. I mean, it's your role to look at prioritisation. So you haven't done that?
No.
Okay.
No, and it will be, to Chris's point initially, Your Worship, we will work through to prioritise projects. I mean, the ultimate goal of the risk and opportunities is just a tabular format of the pluses and minuses. So if this goes on as a negative, there will be a review across all parts of councils to identify a reduction in project spend in other areas to fund it.
Yes, I guess that's one approach, but what I'm interested in here is relying less on the risks and opportunities list and more on keeping to the budget and reprioritising if something comes up, which it does, because that's the nature of the business that we're in. So I accept that, and I accept the need to do this project, absolutely. And I've got a bit of sympathy with what Councillor Wilson said about who's doing it, but at the end of the day, I've got confidence that the staff will get the right deal. That's my issue.
Yep, and just that point, even if Chris had come today with $350,000 worth of funding from another project, I would still, from a transparency point of view, recorded both the positive and the negative on the risk and opportunity schedule. So, and the point I make to staff is the risk and opportunity schedule is not a bank. By putting items on there, it doesn't mean it's funded. All it means is I've captured it and I'm going to come after you to ensure it's funded. So that's the process we're going to work through with that.
Yep. And there is a discipline around the SLT table led by Richard to continue looking at the risk and opportunities and how we bring in a balanced outcome at the end of the year. So by default, that it's looking at those opportunities.
Yes, I suppose I'm looking though at, rather than approaching on that basis, there's, things have to go, like the previous contract we've approved earlier today, where a prioritisation occurred to enable you to fund a significant project. And while this one is much smaller in money, it's still the same thing, same principle, yeah. Okay, so I'm expecting that you're going to do that, and you're going to tell us at the next finance meeting what's been reprioritised off. Thanks.
Thank you. I would join the Mayor in agreeing that we really don't have a lot of choice in terms of getting this system fixed, but also echo Councillor Wilson's comments that if there are good deals out there, as it appears the Hospital Board were able to secure a much cheaper deal, then we should be looking down towards those directions too. So the recommendation from management. Dave. Oh, sorry, Dave. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I just had another question that arose out of that discussion. Thanks. I'll just preface that by saying every time we're asked to spend money on that underground car park, I feel that we'd probably be just as well off getting the cash out of the bank and letting it go in the wind from the top floor there, because no matter what we spend money on, quite literally it reduces in value, that asset. I don't even know whether the word asset is right in a colloquial sense.
We got plenty like that.
Sorry. But I want to ask Chris, apart from the customer experience, which Phil mentioned, the bad customer, intermittent bad customer experience, would there be any other reason why we wouldn't just sell it, knowing that we're going to get 350 odd K less for the sale? That's a sort of a general question, but more specifically, what's the timeline for the sale? We've already extended it out by a hell of a long time, more than once. If I was going to vote for spending $250,000 on something like that, I'd like to know that it was actually going to improve our chances of a sale, which was going to be sorted in the next 2 months or some short period, rather than frittering it away really in endless negotiations with Kiwi properties.
Yeah, I'll defer to Blair again on that question, if I may, Mr Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Section 21 of the report just sort of talks about that side of the process. We had some good discussions yesterday with Kiwi, who are obviously the first party who have the right of first refusal to make an offer on the car park. I would anticipate that between now and Christmas we'll be in a position to bring something back to council. There are
Sorry, Blair, if I could just interrupt there. You would anticipate, is that an actual guarantee? Because we've had deadline dates before on this,
yes,
at least twice,
that's our best
whereby decisions had to be made.
Yeah, certainly our best endeavours is to have something before Christmas. That's certainly the intention. It is a complex matter, and I think the report there outlines there are some things that we need to finalise in terms of some in terms of operational matters for the car park. That then dictates the valuation, which then dictates the process in terms of an offer forthcoming from Kiwi to us. So we're working as fast a process as we can to conclude those agreements around the operational nature of the car park, which will then facilitate the valuation.
Could we not have a contract with Kiwi or any buyer that said they will pay X dollars subject to this thing being fixed, for instance?
It's not so much the matter is around how we operate the car park, and there are specific agreements that we need to conclude with them around in terms of how the car park is priced and operated. That is what we're working through, and we're working through at the fastest pace to conclude that. Once we have that concluded, then the valuation can be completed. So.
Blair, those sort of issues have been raised for at least 3 years, maybe more. I can recall when we first discussed it, the question of whether it was targeting commuters or shoppers, and what sort of pricing structure compared with other local car parks it would have and things like that. It seems ridiculous that we still haven't got a settled operational plan that we can put into that mix.
So through the Chair, I'm happy to give more of an update in public excluded, but certainly I can assure Council that we are working at the utmost haste to conclude these discussions, but I'm limited as to what I can say in an open meeting. So.
All right. Andrew, Councillor King.
Are we able to talk about this in public excluded?
If the committee would like to do that, if the committee wishes to do that, we can consider that when we get into public excluded.
Thank you.
Well, then we shouldn't decide until we hear that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if that's the wish, if you wish to defer this recommendation until then, is that the wish of the committee?
I've got no problem. This matter still needs to be dealt to, irrespective of the sale. And bear in mind too that there are two parties to the sale, not just the council who may be delaying progress. Through council staff may be not the only party that would be delaying progress.
But there was a contractual agreement initially that Kiwi Property Income would buy this office, this off council, by a certain date or not. In other words, they had the first right of refusal, and that's gone past. So. And now we're being told it's up to us to work out some of the operational things. So, all of this is mixed, and we're being asked to spend more money on the asset when we don't know what's happening in that area. And I, for one, if that, the general manager's saying that will affect things. So.
I'm happy that we defer the continued discussion on item 15 and consider this in public excluded. Okay.
Chair, if it's necessary, I'm happy to move that item 15 be moved into public excluded.
Thank you,
if that assists the process.
And I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Those in favour, please say aye.
Excuse me, don't we have to have we have to justify that?
Commercial negotiations. So
on the grounds of commercial sensitivity.
That's right, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, thank you. We'll continue that discussion later. Chris, you step down for a short period of time.
Be gone. Be gone.
Thank you.
Out damn snot.
Item 16, which is the IS program update. Welcome, David. welcome Eon. Take the report as read, and any particular verbal comments that you wish to make on the report?
No comments at all. Any questions for you, Mr. Chair?
No questions, all right. Well, I'll so move that the report be received. Have a second, Deputy Mayor Chesterman. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 17 we have considered. Just wondering if we break. Just wonder if we. Oh no, let's consider item. Let's consider item 18, Weather Tide Homes, and welcome Phil. Take the report as read. Are there any questions of Phil?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Just a quick comment on the graph number 14. It shows that Hamilton's largely escaped the horrors of the leaky buildings compared to other cities. I know you've explained this once before, but with new councils, I'm wondering if you were able to just give a couple of comments on why you think Hamilton is so low compared to other centres. I mean, Tauranga, for example, at 47, is a huge difference from the 17 that we've got. Why do you think that was?
It really comes back to two things. One is the type of construction that occurred in Hamilton during the period sort of 96 through to 2003, where we didn't have too many multi-unit buildings. We had generally standalone houses, and also the quality of the buildings in Hamilton. Those are the two fundamental things that I think have got us across the line.
Thank you, Phil. Any further questions?
I'd suggest that our buildings were inspected properly as well during the process.
Phil was too modest.
Far too modest.
Far too modest, yes. Okay, we'll also move that the report be received. Do I have a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So the next step is to move into public excluded, and I suggest that we move that and then take a break for afternoon tea.
I'll move.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I wish to raise a point about the process here in item C6. I'm not going to discuss item C6 except the question why it's been included in public excluded. I would have thought that the process, if I may, I would have thought that the process of whether or not to go to public tender, which is a decision on a principle, and it's actually seeking a variation of our normal practice, that that could have been discussed in public. The only thing on reading that report that I could see that is that a particular contractor is named, but that contractor, it's only in the context of what's publicly known about that person anyway. It is known that he is the current contractor, and there's only one aspect of that could conceivably have been a matter of commercial sensitivity, and I doubt that myself, but we could certainly discuss that. But it seems to me that the principle of whether you do that in these sort of circumstances should be a matter of public interest. Not great public interest, but it should be. There's no reason. In fact, it might bore people sleepless. But we should be that sort of thing. I mean, if we can discuss 350,000 for the car park and those other contractual things in public, why can't we discuss the principle here in public?
It does say here to protect the privacy of natural persons.
We've talked about this before. We've actually specifically asked staff that if there is a small aspect of a report that maybe need to be confidential for that reason, and I'll certainly accept sometimes you have that sort of thing, then why can't that be removed and either put in confidential session, or just it's how germane, when you look at that report, what's germane isn't the person's name, really. The rest of it could have all been done in public.
So your comments initially, Councillor McPherson, are correct as the reason why it was put in public excluded, and it was effectively in terms of protecting the particular individual who is inherently tied up with this contract. So ultimately it's hard to separate the two, but that was the reason it was put forward as public excluded.
Yeah, but what about the request we made to management some time ago that you consider whether reports really need to be in public excluded and whether you couldn't remove a sentence or change a sentence, and we were only talking about a sentence or two, in order to allow it to be in public? You know, remove specificity and change it to a more general statement. You know, it doesn't seem that management, they just find one tiny aspect, and I'm talking about tiny here, and say, well, that has to be confidential, so the whole thing should be. When it's actually, a principles, council should discuss whether we have an open and transparent process.
Yeah, and I suppose in this case, Councillor, it was whether or not we could have, given the nature of the contract, whether or not you could have actually, even by removing those fine points, actually have, knowing who the contract is currently provided by, separated them within the report from a public and open session versus a public excluded session. And that decision was made, and I suppose that the discussion of council whether or not they want to continue with that.
Didn't we have a discussion about valuation in public and with similar limited tenderers?
And ultimately this is, whilst it is for a company, is one individual rather than one company. So I suppose that was the difference we're drawing here.
So look, why can't we just vote? I mean, if Dave wants it out of public, so let's just put it on the table and vote.
Well, yeah, that's fine, and I'm certainly going to move to that, but
Get on with it.
I would like to know what value it is, our request to staff, that they actually consider this, consider keeping things in public by slightly altering wording of reports, which is something we had asked them to do, including your worship had asked them whether they could consider that in the future, I remember rightly, back last year. Why couldn't we, when our staff can actually consider that, I'm just going to automatically do it. This is my problem, it's automatically being put in public excluded without consideration of whether it might be able to be kept in public. You know, that's the principle I'm talking about here. And well, otherwise we shouldn't have even bothered with that discussion before.
Well, certainly at the finance setting agenda, when the finance agenda setting is done, those questions are considered by the elected members who are at that meeting. So there is some input from elected members in terms of what might or might not go into public excluded. And that's certainly been the case for this committee. But Councillor Mallett?
Dave, would you suggest that the things that should come out are paragraph 14, 23, 24, 25, because they have the contractor's name?
Yeah, well, look, yeah.
But you're saying
that sort of thing, sort of thing, yeah.
And then the rest of it could be conducted in public?
That sort of thing, yes, Gary. I haven't got those paragraphs open in front of me, but
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Would you like, Dave, Councillor McPherson, do you want to vote on this today or on this specific item C6 today?
No, I'm not going to make any more of an issue of it, but I do, other than to request that staff actually follow their process internally.
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor McPherson's point, I understand. I very clearly understand the position he's coming from.
So Chair, if Councillor McPherson is not going to be further concerned about it, it should remain in public excluded, but the points he's making should be noted for future occasions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, Deputy Mayor Chesterman has moved. We move to resolve to move to exclusion, public exclusion. Councillor Young has seconded that. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So we will resume at 3:20, please.